There's a lot of things that video games make look incredibly easy. You could become a master assassin, you could be a world-class pilot, an expert lockpick, or even a high-ranking soldier without ever getting off the comfort of your couch. But every once in a while, a game takes something that is completely ordinary, well, at least in real life, and somehow makes it unbelievably difficult. Welcome to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to look at things harder in games than in real life. And we're going to start off with a really in-your-face, simple one. Walking. Walking is one of those things that you probably haven't thought about in years. You stand up, you put one foot in front of the other, and that's pretty much it. Unless you're playing something like GTA 4, basically any other Rockstar game. If you move too quickly in a game built on a physics-based engine, your character will stumble, fall over, kick their own legs, occasionally manage to travel about 3 feet before collapsing onto the track. And you know how to walk in real life. You don't have to think about it, you do it. But games like this, it takes all that invisible coordination and throws it down the toilet. Yeah, it's really funny when your character just keeps falling over, but it's kind of counterintuitive. And I would say the same goes for cooking. Cooking is another activity that video games have a strange relationship with. In real life, you could spend an hour preparing a complicated meal. Carefully measure out your ingredients, make sure everything is cooked properly. Or you can make a grilled cheese sandwich in about 5 minutes, but then games like Overcooked make everything look way more complicated. It takes something as mundane as preparing food and it turns into this high-pressure team sport. Chop ingredients, cook them, wash dishes, put meals together, deliver them to customers. Plus, the game becomes especially ridiculous when you're playing with other people. I mean, you're yelling at your friends because somebody put the tomatoes in the wrong place with 3 orders burning in the oven. In reality, the worst thing that happens when you're making dinner is that you accidentally overcook something. And Overcooked, or Cooking Mama for that matter, dinner can become a catastrophic logistical failure that destroys actual real-life friendships. Next up is surgery. Now, obviously, surgery is extremely difficult in real life, but at least real surgeons have the advantage of taking and having actual control over their hands. But I can't think of a single video game that actually gives you proper control of your hands during surgery. And it must be just one giant practical joke in the industry. Look at Surgeon Simulator. The game gives you a hand, a collection of medical instruments, and absolutely no help beyond that, and it's needlessly frustrating to control your own limbs. You have to perform operations using deliberately awkward controls, and even something as simple as picking up a tool can become ordeal. And granted, Surgeon Simulator isn't trying to accurately portray or simulate surgery. I know that. It's a comedy game. I get it. But after playing it for a few hours, gotta wonder, would you be better at real-world surgery than you are at Surgeon Simulator? At number 7, climbing. Climbing a mountain in real life is obviously far more dangerous and physically demanding than it is in a video game, but some games aren't really interested in realism. They're actually interested in making you suffer, often to a comical level of difficulty. Have you ever played Getting Over It with Bennett Foddy? If you haven't, you've seen clips. It's a hilarious game, but it's the perfect example of what I'm talking about. The objective sounds simple. Climb a mountain. That's it. You control a man sitting inside a metal conduit using a sledgehammer to propel himself upward. Problem is, there's absolutely nothing stopping you from losing an hour of progress in 3 seconds. One bad swing can send you flying backward, forcing you to repeat sections you already completed. And if you were actually climbing a mountain, well, you would have things like handholds, climbing equipment, ropes, and probably an experienced person telling you what you're doing wrong. And getting over it, you have a hammer, and you have the growing realization that you made a terrible decision. Speaking of terrible decisions, flying a plane. Now, flying a plane is obviously an extremely complicated skill in real life, but there's one major advantage that pilots have. They know how all those buttons work in the cockpit. Some games dumb down the act of flying a plane way too much to the point of it not being realistic anymore, while other games, like Microsoft Flight Simulator, they do a really good job at making you feel like the dumbest person on the planet for even trying to fly a plane. Altitude, airspeed, navigation, fuel, landing gear, flaps, radio communications. Suddenly you're looking at the cockpit that contains more buttons than an OG Nokia phone. Seriously. And while modern flight simulators can be extremely realistic, they're also, there's one hilarious problem here. They make you realize just how much the average person doesn't know how to fly a plane or shouldn't ever be in charge of flying a plane. At number 5, packing a suitcase. This one is especially funny because inventory management is something that almost nobody considers a real-life challenge. If you own 5 bottles of water, you don't have to open a menu and decide which one's going to go into slot number 3. You just shove them in your bag. And if you need to fit something else in that same bag, you just shimmy everything around till they fit. Video games, however, they've decided that carrying objects it's an advanced organizational skill. The most famous example are the Resident Evil games, especially 4 and 5. Your character can carry guns, ammunition, herbs, keys, grenades, medical supplies, various random objects you find along the way, but somehow only enough room for a handful of them. So now you're standing in the middle of a zombie-infested mansion trying to determine whether a key item is more important than a box of shotgun shells. Real-life backpacking has never felt so simple. At number 4, building a house. Now, building a house in real life is difficult. You need architects, engineers, construction workers, permits, materials, tools, money, several years of your life, right? But if you're playing something like The Sims or Planet Zoo, you can not only build anything without pre-established pieces, but you also can't build anything that's not a pre-established grid. You literally can't build outside the grid, no matter how hard you try or how talented you are at construction. Yeah, that's easier than real-life construction in a certain way, but it's also a lot stupider in other ways. Could you imagine if you bought a patch of land, wanted to build something, but then the universe came down and said, no, you can't build there because it's not perfectly aligned on a bunch of 90-degree angles. At number 3, space travel. Now, getting into space in real life is one of humanity's greatest technological achievements. So imagine how silly you look flopping around in space in games like Starfield or Star Wars Battlefront, running into every possible obstruction and blowing up immediately. Then you have games like Kerbal Space Program, where everything is needlessly difficult and comically obtuse, even if you do have the proper real-world knowledge. What if your rocket just falls over? What if your engines aren't strong enough? What if you actually make it to orbit, then you realize, I forgot the landing gear? All entirely impossible things for real-world space travel, but slightly common occurrences in actual space video game sims. And number 2, platforming. Now, jumping is another thing that is remarkably easy in real life. You bend your knees, you push off the ground, gravity takes care of the rest, right? Video games have somehow managed to turn this into an exact science. If you were standing somewhere and needed to get over a gap or onto a surface, you hop over it. You wouldn't even have to think that hard about it. You just do it. But in lots of video games, it feels like jumping from surface to surface is an exact science that you need to have a degree to complete. And it's really counterintuitive when you get down to it. Yeah, part of the appeal of platforming games is the challenge it comes with making your way from surface to surface successfully. But when you really think about what you're doing, it's way harder than it probably should be. In real life, you simply skip the gap or grab the edge of the next surface. But it's not that easy in a game. And at number 1, things harder in games than real life. Doing nothing. Yeah, doing nothing. When is the last time you were holding a controller in a video game and you chose to do nothing? When's the last time you were in a game world where you could literally do anything you want with no consequence, and instead, you chose to stand there and zone out? I mean, we've all done it in real life. We sit there and stare at a wall, think about random things, but in a video game, everything in our body is fighting us and telling us we have to be moving at all times. I mean, why do you think games take control away from us during cutscenes? Because if we had control during the cutscene, we'd be running around, jumping on tables, punching NPCs, and doing everything we possibly could to avoid doing nothing. Doing nothing in a video game is really, really hard. It's honestly hard to explain why, but it is. But nobody watching this video is capable of doing nothing in a video game, and that is why it's number 1 on today's list, yeah. Prove it to me. Prove to me that you're capable of doing nothing in a video game. I'll see you guys soon.